Hello and welcome to Deadline White House. I'm Alicia Menendez. Today we start with this telling quote, "Didn't pay taxes." That's how Donald Trump this weekend tried to describe the tax fraud scheme that the Trump Organization is purported to have orchestrated for the last 15 years.
They go after good, hard-working people for not paying taxes on a company car. Company car. You didn't pay tax on the car. Or a company apartment. You used an apartment because you need an apartment because you have to travel too far where your house is. You didn't pay tax. Or education for your grandchildren. I don't even know. Do you have to? But does anybody know the answer to that stuff?
Let's be clear. The charges against Trump's company and his longtime accountant, Alan Weisselberg, are a bit more serious than simply not paying taxes. A 15-count indictment reached by a grand jury accuses the Trump Organization and Weisselberg of tax fraud, grand larceny, conspiracy, and other criminal charges. So, yes, you do have to pay taxes on what is essentially additional salary converted into luxurious benefits. And yes, Alan Weisselberg was required by law to pay taxes on more than $1.7 million in untaxed income in the form of Mercedes-Benz cars, free rent, private school tuition in Manhattan, and thousands of dollars in cash. According to prosecutors, people inside the Trump Organization knew that. That's why they allegedly kept records of all the salary they illegally converted into untaxed pay in what the Washington Post calls the accounting equivalent of a confession. This weekend, Donald Trump also falsely claimed that prosecutors have never charged a company for tax fraud.
Think of how unfair it is. Never before has New York City and their prosecutors, or perhaps any prosecutors, criminally charged a company or a person for fringe benefits. Fringe benefits. Murder's okay. Human trafficking, no problem. But fringe benefits, you can't do that.
But this case isn't really about fringe benefits. In a new piece for Just Security, Dan Shaviro, a professor of taxation at New York University Law School, writes, "This is no mere fringe benefits case. It is a straight-out fraud case." Leading off our discussion this afternoon, Cynthia Alksny, former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst. Cynthia, the indictment says, quote, tuition expenses for Weisselberg's family members were paid by personal checks drawn on the account of and signed by Donald J. Trump. Cynthia, does that suggest to you that Trump knew and took part in the crimes alleged in this indictment?
Yes, it does. And I completely agree. This is we have everything we need. And they're really not only pressuring him to flip, but the amount of detail in this indictment tells me that they're trying to tell other people, you have got to flip because we have everything. We have the double books. We know what you told your tax accountants was a lie. We know that we're going to be able to prove these cases. So I think it's a stair-stepping, like anything in forms of indictment. So that first it's Weisselberg, and there are a lot of other people mentioned, individual number one or person X signed or person Y signed. Those people who were mentioned in the indictment, I would expect they're next, and then it builds and builds.
Cynthia, if you were prosecuting this case and you had access to the years of hidden records kept by the Trump Organization, where would you focus this investigation next?
I would focus it on the kids. I would focus it. Apparently, they've had some testimony by the controller. In the state of New York, that means they've essentially given him immunity. So I would focus on the kids. My guess is calamari is kind of easy picking, and that there's similar ways to give money for the kids. We've heard a lot of this reporting about Ivanka Trump getting consulting fees for things that she may or may not have done. And that looks to me like the next place. But, we'll just have to see.
There were a lot of answers that came out of this indictment. There were also, of course, many questions. Which unanswered questions do you still have?
Well, I would like to know every bit of detail on what they were telling the accountants, because that really is telling, isn't it? If you tell your accountants, this is my income, and it turns out that that's not true, that's very important for establishing your intent to evade taxes. It's very important for the fraud. So to me, exactly what they told the accountants who prepared these the tax returns is the next thing I really want to see.
Cynthia, I want to read you a quote from the week about Rudy Giuliani and tax fraud cases. It says, Leona Helmsley, who died in 2007, was a greed-is-good tabloid staple real estate magnate who served 19 months in prison after being convicted of tax fraud in 1989. She and her husband renovated their Greenwich, Connecticut mansion with millions siphoned from their hotel and real estate empire. The prosecutor who sent Helmsley to jail was Rudy Giuliani. Does that completely dismantle the Trump defense that a tax fraud indictment of this kind has never been done before in New York?
Well, of course it has been done before, and it's done all the time. And beyond that, it highlights this defense that they're trying to pull, this, oh, who cares? People do care. People do care, and the jury will hate him. Remember, he's not going to have a jury of people who go to MAGA rallies. He's going to have a cross-section of people who live in Manhattan, who do pay Manhattan taxes, who don't get free Mercedes, who don't have somebody else pay for their children's education and not have tax ramifications for that. So I think he will be a very hated defendant, Mr. Weisselberg, and I'm sure his defense attorneys have told him so.
Cynthia Alexny, thank you so much for joining us.